Why do some businesses thrive and dominate their markets for decades, while others make a quick rise but are brought swiftly to their knees? Today, I speak with Peter High. He is the author of several books, including Getting to Nimble, How to Transform Your Company into a Digital Leader. He is a highly sought-after speaker, a Forbes columnist, and a consultant for some of the top CIOs in the world today. He is going to dive into the top business techniques for innovative leaders in the digital era. I'm your host, Leah Seener, and this is Digital Adoption. Hi, Peter. Welcome.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so happy you're with me on the podcast. I was just checking out your book on Amazon, so I know you're going to share some secrets from there. But before you tell me more about the book, I really want to hear what your goal is as an expert, as someone who, helps companies really transform their businesses successfully on a digital level. When you come into a company and when you meet with an executive team, what's your goal? What are you looking to do?
Well, a few different things, Leah, and thank you for your kind words. A few different things. Number one, our intent is always to understand where are they beginning this journey. No two organizations begin the journey towards digital transformation from the same place. And so a key ingredient in the initial stages is to understand how far have they gotten, whether intentionally or unintentionally, as the case may be. And especially on top of that, it is actually good to understand the intentionality. Do they have a strategy associated with it? Do they have a breakdown of the activities associated with the people consequences, the process changes, the technology changes that are necessary, the broader ecosystem that they need to bring together in order to breathe life into this, and ultimately the clarity of their plans, their strategies, and so on. But also to understand how pervasive is this. IT and digital not so long ago was the domain of a single organization, a division of a larger company, so long as it wasn't a technology or digital company by nature. Right. And as such, the preponderance of talent and thought around technology and digital capabilities were happening in that pocket. And today, that has changed dramatically, and it's much more pervasive. And so also kind of frankly understanding how engaged is the rest of the executive team, how engaged is the rest of the company, and cognizant of the changes that are happening and why. And then ultimately, the goal is to help each mature, make sure that their practices that they're putting in place will in fact help them get better relative to each of these areas, as well as to help them get on a path towards sustainable success. The pace of change has never been faster than it is today, and it will never be slower than at this point forward. And so as a result of that, if you do not have an ability to change, a willingness to do so, making that essentially a cultural attribute, well, then the consequences can be fairly dire fairly quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you said in the beginning that this type of business move used to sit in one isolated pocket, the IT, department. And one thing that we've really noticed in our company in working with so many different enterprises that are really figuring out, okay, how can we nail this digital transformation thing? What's going well and what's going wrong? Is that the CIO in general has just become a much more strategic role. And there's like no more IT silo. IT is front and center right now with, business driven changes and strategic changes and decisions and investments. So I really love that you pointed that out. I think that's a really great point. And yeah, it's very cool that I listened to your podcast and I was like, whoa, you're talking to some really amazing CIOs and CTOs and people in really big companies that are making probably incredibly strategic decisions for massive amounts of people. And one thing that I heard you say was that, the people side of the strategy is like the first area that you address. I know it's the first area you address in your book. And I heard you talk a lot about that. And when I was just sifting through the, episodes on your podcast, I saw that was a really big, a really main point that you made is like, how do these digital changes affect people? So that's also something, that we really talk about a lot at our company. And I would love to hear, from your own experience, your own career, when did you get into that mindset where this was something that you wanted to really dive into and become a champion for successful, digitally equipped businesses? If you have any aha moments, throughout your career that led you to get here, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I was really fortunate, Leah. One of the first companies that I advised, and mind you, as a low man on the totem pole, so very early in my career,
Yeah.
was a bank in South Africa called Nedbank, still exists today.
Okay.
And their chief information officer this is in this would be 1997, was also the head of innovation for the company. And that is remarkably progressive for that time period. CIOs definitively around the world were leading support organizations on average within the companies they served. Mm-hmm. And so that was a remarkable aha moment for me, that this leader recognized that he had a strategic perch within his bank, and as leading technology, had an ability to influence not only the internal operation in profound ways, but also customers' experiences in profound ways as well, and made the case with the change and progress that he was able to marshal in taking over innovation for the entire bank. And what was interesting, Leah, is it would be quite some time before I saw a lot of examples like that. I would see it in pockets here and there as I worked with a whole range of leading CIOs around the world at companies of consequence. But it would certainly not be the average. One could argue even today that what I've just described isn't necessarily fully blossomed in the average organization. But just as you say, what's been really key is, with more examples of executives like that gentleman I just referred to. Yeah. Now I think there's a better idea as to what good looks like, and more CIOs who are aspiring to not only impact the bottom line of the profit equation through efficiencies and cost savings, but also the top line of the profit equation in revenue augmentation and better customer experience and so on. And that really, I think, is a wonderful sign as to the influence that this role can have. So, but that way back when, at the early stages of my career, that was a significant aha moment as to what really was possible. And in many cases, I was really trying, as I climbed the rungs towards more senior levels in my career, attempted to influence with the technologists that I was advising.
Yeah, that is really pretty revolutionary to think about that in the late 90s, that a CIO was like already kind of seeing the other side. Hey, I can get in on that side, not just back here. Like, do you remember why he and how he was doing that, and how that had come about, and what kind of things he was doing on the innovation side for the bank? I love that story. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of things. He had a force of personality and a great ambition and a clarity of vision that I think really was compelling for the rest of the organization. And likewise, he was fortunate to be in an executive team who recognized him and recognized that vision, that ambition as something to tap into. So I think it really was right place, right time, and right executive team that in many ways that helped drive that forward. Because, Leah, it's not as though he could say, look, every other company's doing it this way. Why aren't we?
Right.
I mean, frankly, it was the opposite. And so it could be a conversation that would be shut down fairly quickly by saying, what you're suggesting is by no means de rigueur, and so why would we go down that path? So fortunately for him, that wasn't the response as he made these sorts of proposals.
Yeah, which isn't luck. And it's something I think also for executive teams to remember, that now everyone is doing it. So you have every reason to jump on the, innovative digital transformation kind of train, but that also it takes being, I think, somewhat, agile and, let's say, nimble and willing to, experiment and do things a little bit differently. I think that you definitely see those are the companies that end up being ahead of the curve, the ones that aren't waiting for everyone else to be doing it. Well, I'm glad that he did that, because it clearly inspired you as well. And it's also, pretty good insight and foresight that you saw then that was something really, valuable to, see what he was doing and see, to aspire, to continue that. I love that. All right. So tactically speaking, you have your hands dirty in companies that are going through these major transformations, and I'm sure hitting, oftentimes very common, probably bottlenecks and common issues. And no one talks about it because no executive team wants to let on to their competitors that they're struggling, let alone with technology. So without naming names, I would love to hear if there are some universal kind of digital transformation and even more specifically digital adoption challenges that you see are really common among big companies.
Yeah. So I think One of the biggest issues that we see across a lot of organizations is not recognizing the cultural element of these sorts of changes. It is not comfortable for any of us to change. That's not that's not the orientation we crave. We like routine as human beings. We like routine. We like to start our day the same sort of way with the same cup of coffee if we're coffee drinkers, and we seek comfort and draw comfort, frankly, from routine. And there are a great many organizations. I tell the story in the book of the Standard & Poor's 500 index here in the United States. The company that had the best performance on the S&P 500 for the 1980s was a company called Circuit City. And they were an electronics retailer, consumer electronics retailer. You remember them?
Yes.
And they revolutionized customer experience. They had a remarkable sales staff who were able to kind of upsell. You go in for a television and come out with a VCR and, peripherals that would help you with the sound for that television and so on. The windfall from that meant that they were able to start other companies. CarMax, a big car retailer here in the US, was born out of the company, among others. And then in 2001, they were featured in Jim Collins' best-selling book, Good to Great, one of 15, I believe it is, companies that were profiled as sort of having a secret sauce to going from good performance to more sustainable, great performance. That was 2001, and the company was liquidated in 2008. And that is, in many ways, I won't get into, we don't have time to go through all of the reasons for that, but part of it was a lack of willingness to change, sticking to their knitting way too long, and other competitors of theirs passed them by as a result of that. Yeah. And so it is critically important, going back to the very first theme that you underscored as well, of the people and the cultural aspects of this. I asked the Google CIO, of about a dozen or 13 years, Ben Fried, a couple years ago at a conference we were both speaking at in Mexico, how has Google maintained its entrepreneurial spirit despite becoming a behemoth? And he said, the thing that we do best in many ways is make change a core competence. And I think that's such a great lesson. It's easier said than done. What it requires in order to bring that to life isn't nothing, right? It takes a lot of hard work to do so, but it's something to strive for, I think, for all of us. Yeah. And so, I think that's really kind of one of the significant aspects of what determines whether an organization can make the necessary changes to truly digitally transform.
Yeah. And what do you see, what do you see helps a company culture be open to change? Like what does that look like on the ground?
So I think it is like learning more stories like the one of Circuit City and other many other once stalwarts, once great leaders in their industries that are no more. And to diagnose why was it that each of those companies became extinct, and therefore, if they were once not just good companies but outstanding, great companies, then why can't this happen to us? We all need to be humble enough to recognize that the future is not, isn't going to be presented for us at our feet. We need to re-earn every year and even more frequently continued success, and that means an ability to recognize that what got us here may not get us to the future. It may not be the same rules that apply as we go forward. And so really, one of the key thesis from my book and the whole process of getting to Nimble, as the title suggests, is ensuring that you are developing the right practices to be sure that yours is not an organization that is the anchor keeping the boat held back and keeping it from pivoting when necessary, but rather the engine and the rudder that steers it towards opportunity and away from danger. And there are some practices that the best companies have employed in order to do so. And so I'm super passionate about ensuring that more companies recognize and understand what those steps are and put those into place so that they can achieve greater levels of success. Despite the fact that in this day and age, startups are coming fast and furious for almost all businesses, it seems. And so thinking and acting more like a modern digital business, even if you're a digital immigrant, as I refer to them, those born before the digital age, that is companies born before the digital age, very important for you to make the necessary changes in order to sustain that success.
WalkMe Elevate is back and you are invited. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Hillard, VP of Customer Engagement here at WalkMe, and I'm excited to invite you to our annual event dedicated to helping professionals develop the skills they need to thrive as a digital adoption leader at their organization. Last year, we brought together over 500 DAP professionals from all over the world. And this year, we are opening up the event to any individual interested in learning more about the digital adoption industry. So, if that sounds like you, then join us on July 28th and 29th. You can register now on walkme.com.
I was speaking to someone a few nights ago on the podcast, and he brought up such a good point, which is in terms of experience, in terms of, being able to translate the consumer experience into the employee experience, that's now the standard. Someone can't go about their life in this very digital, easy way where they buy their groceries online and they buy their shoes online and they order their pizza online and they, fill out their forms for their bank online. And then they come to work and they have to use the fax machine and the photocopier and they have to hand fill out everything. And, or even if everything's on the computer, but it's like the slowest, most manual, worst digital version and nothing's easy to do. It's like, we can't ask that of people anymore. The consumer digital experience is so high now that the company level has to catch up because, like you said, startups are coming for everyone. And I think also, as individuals, for employees, there's just going to always be, at this point, an easier digital experience at another company. If you're good at what you do and your work starts to be annoying because the way that you work is not easy and is not intuitive and isn't enjoyable, then you're going to be able to find another company that's going to give you a better experience. It's like the employee experience has become very competitive, digitally speaking.
Very well said. I couldn't agree more. And it's this device that kind of changed everything. I'm holding up my iPhone. I recognize we're only doing audio here, but the iPhone, it really changed everyone's expectations. All of a sudden, it wasn't that long ago that you might go into a CEO's office and there wasn't even a computer. I remember those days not that long ago. And now it's not, again, as I mentioned, on top of that, the people that understood technology were all in the IT department. Yeah. Now we all are technologists to a degree. Doesn't mean we all understand computer science or that we would be A students if we went back to get an engineering degree. But none of us would be able to argue effectively, as many tried to not so long ago, that technology is really the domain of the people I don't understand. And I'd prefer that they only speak when they're spoken to. Now it's the lever, quite frankly, to really put a fine point on it. It's been one of the key determinants, all things being equal, as to who's been more resilient during this current crisis and who hasn't. Those people, those organizations, that have digitally transformed, were able to lean on digital revenue streams, were able to gauge the digital health or the health generally of their operations, could engage with customers digitally at a time when they would be much more reluctant to do business with anyone in person. And so it's been really, although of course I wouldn't wish this to be a pathway towards it, we're seeing a lot of technology and digital leaders who had long gone unsung, and now people are singing their praises justifiably. Totally.
Yeah, there were digital offerings made, I think, throughout the pandemic that beforehand they might have thought would have taken, a year, 2 years to get their consumers to, get with the program. And I think because of lack of choice, things just happened overnight. But it definitely was eye-opening in terms of seeing how much more willing people are to engage digitally and to kind of change, which is, what we were saying is there's so much resistance to naturally for human beings. But I think that people choose change if it's easy. I think people resist change if it's hard, so I think that's really, because on the one hand, everyone hates change. On the other hand, if you give someone an obviously easier option, eventually, even if it takes a little bit of time, but I don't think that much time, they'll take it, because we like easy. So I think it's also, when you look at companies that are trying to get their workforces, 10,000 people, let's say, to shift a process in their company, if you can make it easy, you'll get them. If you want them to change and do something harder, good luck. So I think a lot of it comes down to experience, the digital experience that you're offering your workforce, if we're speaking to business leaders. Okay, what else is something important that I wanted to ask you? Oh, well, before I forget, I would love for our listeners to know, if you could kind of break down, I'm sure you've done this enough times by now, but kind of break down for us, what can readers look forward to in Getting to Nimble, how to transform your company into a digital leader? If you could kind of summarize what that looks like for people if they're interested in reading it.
Sure. Let me use the S&P 500 again as an example. In 1958, a company that was on the S&P 500 would likely, on average, remain there for 61 years. Today, if your company is on the S&P 500, it's closer to 15 years to be your average tenure. And that is just a remarkable story of creative destruction on the one hand, but also of remarkable innovation as new companies have taken the place of the old stalwarts and grown rapidly in order to do so. And so with that as the backdrop, again, offering a bit of a note of caution, there are ways in which organizations can make this change. I tell the stories of companies like Domino's Pizza, a company that's based in Michigan that sells pizza, for goodness sake, not a stereotypical technology organization that was, doing okay. They weren't on the verge of bankruptcy or anything, but they were kind of languishing. And they improved their product first and foremost, which was an important step in the process. But they also went through a radical digital transformation that allowed customers to interact with the company in the manner they chose, as opposed to the manner that was dictated to them by by Domino's themselves. And I tell a number of anecdotes as to the steps they undertook. And they, since 2010, have a better stock performance than Amazon, Apple, Facebook, or Google since 2010. So an 11-year period. And they have just really taken off during the pandemic for the steps they've taken to enable the ability to safely deliver or otherwise give people pizza in a way that is safe to do so. I tell the story of the Washington Post. I'm joining you from Washington, so my hometown paper, but an international paper as well. And an organization that was, like so many media properties, really being hamstrung. So many of their advertisers going to the likes of Facebook and Google, and readership down. And again, a great leader, in their case, a guy named Shailesh Prakash, as chief information officer, reoriented the way in which the organization thought about the digital experience and made the digital experience for the paper and the analog experience one. He brought them together, whereas they had been on parallel tracks. And he really solved a number of significant issues in order to improve the experience for the company's employees, especially the reporters, the people who provide the greatest value at the organization, but also readers as well. And now the organization has been thriving and on a growth path, and with all the statistics that have been heading in the wrong direction, almost all of them are heading in the right one as well. So I tell stories that I like to believe are accessible. It's all well and good to talk about like the biggest and best technology companies, but how can any organization accomplish what they can? No,
right.
But you certainly can emulate a pizza company, can't you? In order to go from a position of going from issues to a position of strength. And I talk about and diagnose the steps in order to emulate those kinds of companies.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think that you just nailed it. It's like, you don't have to be a technology company to absolutely utilize technology for your business. So that's awesome. That's great. I'm looking forward to reading it personally. That's great. Okay, Peter, I know you're out of time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to meet you.
Likewise, Leah. I enjoyed it very much. I appreciate your thoughtful questions, and I hope that we can keep in touch.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
And stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.